Dominant seventh chords. You have questions, I have answers. Well, some of the answers, but you know what? Let's just get into it. Okay, so seventh chords. It's one of those things when you're first getting started on guitar, you'll see them in some of your songbooks that you're playing, and it confuses you, and it scares you, and it frightens you. But like most things, once you get the hang of it, it's really not that big of a deal, okay? So what are seventh chords? Well, seventh chords are just 4-note chords, and what we're gonna do is basically we're gonna add the seventh to our major and minor triads. So if you remember a major triad, let's just start there, is your root, your third, and your fifth, right? So like an A major would sound like that. Now if I wanted to add my seventh to that, which is the seventh degree of the scale, again, right? So you've got your A is your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then your octave is back to A. So your what they call a major seventh is just a half a step down. There's your A flat, or what would you call that, a G sharp, if you will. So that is your major seventh. And then you have a flatted seventh, which is, if your 7 is here, if you flat that half a step to G for the A scale, you get your flat 7. And so today we're gonna work on what's called a dominant seventh chord. And the way you'll see that written is it'll just be written with the letter of the chord and a 7. So let's talk about those. They're used a ton in like rockabilly, blues, country. All of Western music uses a dominant seventh, just a ton. So it'd be really valuable to kind of start here. And then in later lessons, we'll get into a major seventh chord and minor seventh chord. We'll do those later, but let's start on this one that'll really help you with roots music, okay? So let's get a little bit closer and we'll see if we can figure some more of this out. All right, so what is the dominant 7 chord? Well, a dominant 7 is you're using a major triad of your root, your third, and your fifth. We're in A in this one, right? And we're gonna add a flat 7 to it. So remember, a flat 7 is one whole step below your root. So if I got an A here, it's gonna be that G, okay? So, and so that's the 4 notes of a dominant 7 chord. And so if you compare that just to straight up A major bar chord, sounds like this. Now an A7 or an A dominant 7 would sound like this. Hear the little bit of difference? It adds just a little extra tension. Again, major, dominant 7. There you go. That's it. So let's talk about a couple of shapes. Actually, let's talk about 4 shapes that I would use probably most of the time, and it'll get you most of the way there with a lot of things you're gonna do in blues, rockabilly, and all that. So let's just start with the big old E-shaped bar chord that we all know and love. So the great thing about this chord, to make it a dominant 7th chord, you only have to lift one finger off, and that's this pinky. So if you think about it, you've got your root here on the low E string, right? And in this case, we're playing an A, and so that A is your root. So an octave up A is right here on the 7th fret D string, right? So if I'm doing my bar chord there, I know that my pinky is holding down another A. Well, if I want to make a dominant 7 chord, I need to drop this A 2 frets. Well, guess what? I'm already barring with my first finger here, so I'm already getting that 7th here. So if I've got my bar chord here, that's just my good old A major, and I lift my pinky, I all of a sudden have that A dominant 7 sound. Easy as pie. And it works everywhere. G7, C7, A. So if you already know your bar chords here in the positions, then you know your 7th chord. You just lift your pinky off of the D string and you're there. All right, so let's build off of that. Now let's talk about the A shape. Let's just do the D here, right? So your standard A shape, same thing. So So it's the same kind of thing on the G string is that octave of the D, right? And I need to drop that a whole step to get a dominant 7 sound. So in this case, instead of barring like this, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lift this finger up so it's off of these, and I'm gonna put my pinky there. So I'm fretting this G string with this finger back here. So you get, instead of, so the major, dominant, 7. And so it uses the same rules, right? So there's my D7, my C7, E7, what else? G7. And then back to that. So same as with this bar chord up here, you're just moving one note and all of a sudden you have a 7 chord, right? So let's go through those one more time. So if I'm in the E bar chord, major, lift my finger, dominant 7. Super easy, right? Same thing, if I'm doing this A shape, major, pull this up, let this string ring out back here with this finger, dominant 7, D, D major, D dominant 7. All right, and so these next two dominant 7 shapes that I'm gonna give you are more partials and kind of inversions. Don't let those words freak you out. Let's just walk through them and I'll show you. So when you're learning your open chords, right, you learn a D like this up here. And then you may have seen in your book a D7. So if we look at this again, right, the D string's open. And then on the G string, I've got my 5. I got another octave D here on the B string. And then I've got my major third on the E string. So again, right, my root is here on the B string. Well, if I drop that down a whole step, all of a sudden I've got 5th, flat 7, major third. And you're gonna say, well, how do I know that if I don't have the root? Well, in this open chord version, you have your open D string, right? So you get like that, so you can hear the 7th. Now, the nice thing about 7th chords is sometimes you can leave notes out. And a lot of times the note you may leave out if you're just going to play a 3-note version is, believe it or not, the root, because a lot of times you're going to be playing with, say, a bass player, or you've kind of already built that tonal center some other way, or the 5th. Because really, the 2 notes that really color these is that flat 7 and the major third, right? That's kind of what gives it, if you hear that, kind of what gives it that dominant sound. So the nice thing about this D-shaped dominant 7 chord is I can move it up. So that D-shaped dominant 7 is another one that I love. Now the next one, we're gonna kind of go off of a C shape. So if I have a C major open chord here, right? We all know it. So my C is here, right? On the A string. Well, if I look at my, what would that be, G string, there's a C down here at the 5th fret. So if I slide that down, I have a flatted 7th right here at the 3rd fret. So I've got my C, just a plain old C major open chord, right? Well, if I take my pinky and I fret the G string on the 3rd fret, all of a sudden, I get a C7 or C dominant 7 chord. Right, and I'm in these 4 middle strings. Well, guess what's a great thing about this? Also movable. So my root is here on my ring finger. So if I slide up to D, keep that same shape, D7. What about E7? Well, if I move up here, and so here's a great thing about this shape also. You could just reduce this to a triad, and basically what you're gonna do is you're gonna eliminate the 5th instead of the root on this one, and you got your root, your major third, and your flat 5. And so you have this, another little triangle So, and now I've got a C7, or a C dominant 7, however you want to think about it. Now, I really like this one for rockabilly and stuff because I can do this alternate pattern. So but I digress. Anyway, so that's 4 shapes I would really, really get under my fingers. And I would call them like an E-shaped, major, dominant 7. A shape, major, dominant 7. D shape, major, dominant 7. And then C shape, dominant 7. Get those 4 kind of under your fingers and then kind of remember that you can just do partials and it'll take you tons of places. And so the last thing we're going to talk about with these dominant 7 chords is why the heck would you even want to use them? So for the sake of simplicity, let's just talk about it in like just a good old 1-4-5, either like a blues or kind of a country progression. The great thing about 7th chords is you can kind of do it as a minor blues, or you can do it major and maybe do a country thing. So let's just talk about a 1-4-5 and let's use G. Why not? So we got a G chord, our major G chord, right? So we might do it, if we just did it with major chords, it would sound kind of like this. So you could do it with just straight up major chords and it would probably sound fine. But if you want to add some kind of movement to your chord progressions, that's where these 7th chords and other things come into play. So let's do this where we're mixing them, and then we'll do it again with just 7th chords, and we'll see how both of those sound compared to just straight up major. So ready? I'll kind of call them out. G, G7, C, D, D7, G. So see how when you added that 7th chord, it was like, oh, we're about to change, we're about to move, and then you go. Your brain hears that and likes that resolution. And so now let's do it again with all dominant 7th chords and see what that sounds like. It makes it a little jazzier, okay? So like G7, C7, D7, G7. So you see how it kind of, it just changes up and makes it feel better. I don't know. I really like dominant 7th chords. You could spend hours and hours, lifetime working on this and figuring out how you move from one chord to another. Because once you get that dominant 7th sound down, it'll even help you with your soloing, right? So let's say I'm in G and I'm kind of wanting to move to the 4 chord. So I might play in G, I might go. See, when I hit that dominant 7, that flat 7 sound, it makes me want to go to that C. And then when I'm in D, then that makes me feel like I want to go back to G, right? So the flat 7, the dominant 7, depending on how you talk about it, I know I'm using it interchangeably and it get a little confusing. Just play around with it. Look up some other stuff. Guthrie Trapp has some great lessons. There's some other guys that kind of explain some more in depth of the theory, but this is kind of a dip your toe in it. Like, you really need to learn these dominant 7th chords, and then you can just play all sorts of great like blues stuff, right? You can kind of be like. And like that, right? That sounds great. Those are just those basic patterns that I showed you a minute ago. That's all it is. Once you start getting those down and you learn where to throw the little flavor of a dominant 7th chord in, like, you are off to the races. Remember, your flat 7, dominant 7 is just one step down from your root. So if you're in A, if you know where your A's are, you know where your dominant 7th is, because it's just a whole step back. All right, there you go. A quick lesson, primer, whatever you want to call it, on dominant 7th chords. You can spend a lifetime working on this stuff. Like, I'm really thinking about it these days. Like, how do I telegraph in my solos, or even with my chords with 7ths and different inversions? Like, you can just spend a lifetime on this chord theory and lead work, playing with changes. It's so fun, it's so rewarding, but it's really a linchpin of Western music. I mean, the blues, country, jazz, all of them use these 7th chords and dominant 7ths. Reminder, there are major 7ths and minor 7ths and minor 7s, flat 5s. There's some other stuff we can get into if you guys like these lessons. I really enjoy doing them, so we're just gonna do them. It's my channel, I can do what I want, right? So comment below, tell me some things that are confusing you about 7th chords and some of the theory of that, and some other things you'd like to see on that. And let's just kind of talk about actually playing guitar for a little while and a few less of the gear videos. I think it's great to have a balance, right? As always, thanks everybody. Don't forget, like, subscribe. The buttons are down there if you haven't done it. We're keep moving along. I hope everybody is doing well and staying safe out there. And hey, I'll catch you on the next one. Later.